All right, welcome back once again to more viewer coaching. We're continuing the trend of trying to get gold players to get the general sense of how people play in that elo range, since it is one of the most common elo ranges. We got Miss Foffy up first here today, or up second today technically, but up first for the YouTube frogs, who said they struggle with aggressive playstyle. So I'm just gonna try and walk forward. I won't necessarily do anything too complicated, I don't think, and just see how you generally deal with it. In these videos, I typically play a little bit different, trying to get a sense of how you guys generally play without me trying to, I don't know, like read all these dodges and everything like that, just how you would play on the ladder. So right away, I am noticing that your movement is pretty good. It fakes me out a little bit, and you aren't going for immediate attacks right as I'm entering your zone. But it does seem like you generally aren't moving out of the way, I guess, and when I approach you, you try and just immediately contest that with an attack, which could be how you're struggling against aggressive players, where if they go into the zone I mentioned last time, you can kind of think of the reactive zone as this big circle around yourself that is the range of what you can react to. Right when I get there, you immediately attack, maybe panic a little bit, and so it seems like when someone's in your zone, you get really nervous about getting hit, and because you get nervous about getting hit, you want to immediately attack like that, for example, which is how aggressive players tend to get their damage, by baiting out attacks getting into people's zones. So the first thing that I would recommend to you is to be aware of that being your habit and try and delay a little bit in a couple areas. So number one, delay your attacks. Number two, delay your movement, maybe your jumps, maybe your dodges. So something like that, right? That side air, if you delay just a little bit as I'm moving forward, unless I do a specific bait or something like that, that's gonna hit me, right? That Sarah's gonna hit me. But because you did it immediately, maybe out of fear, maybe out of panic, that I would just immediately try and contest it, then I was able to get the hit, right, by baiting out and moving forward. So generally, it seems like as I'm entering your zones, once again, you try and immediately go for attacks, as I mentioned at the start. Another way to try and amend that is to move forward yourself. So if you're struggling against aggressive players, one of the ways to deal with it is to make your defensive game better, but another way to do it is to make your offensive game better. And so something I recommend, oh, right there, you definitely should go for recovery. That would be guaranteed, and get a KO if you're not aware. If you are aware, then I'm sorry for being annoying. Yeah, so work on approaches and interrupting my attacks before I go for them. So generally speaking, when you're playing against aggressive players who are moving forward, you want to attack earlier or later than you generally do. That was a great dare, by the way. You want to attack earlier, because if you think about me moving forward, in the time that it takes for your attack to start, I will be in a closer position to you than when you could react to me and when you saw me initially. So if you're attacking earlier, you're going to attack where I'm going to be rather than where I am, and that's really what you want to do against people who are walking forward. Also, on the axe, you really want to be aware, like if I'm entering your zone right here, going for higher risk moves like that sidelight, you really only want to go for sidelights if you have a read on their movement, or if you can catch them out, punish, stuff like that. But otherwise, if I'm just trying to bait you out and I'm trying to dodge through you, stuff like that, I'm going to be able to get a hit. So that's something I would definitely recommend, is accuracy with your attacks, delaying just a bit to ensure that you could use it, or doing it, or could hit it rather, or doing it earlier than you expect in order to interrupt my movement. Hit me before I can hit you. Alright, game number 2 here, and I'm going to take a little bit of a backseat. Rather than just trying to walk forward and approach, I'm going to try and float above you and approach and see how you deal with stuff like that. Because that's also a very common thing that people do, is they float above and then they approach you from the sky. Now, axe is one of the weapons that is most suited, and katars honestly, to dealing with that, so yeah, we'll see how you handle that. It looks like giving up stage control out of movement is something that you tend to do a little bit, so I would be careful about that. Being in the center stage is a big advantage. So I think going for option A, what I like to call it, like the most obvious, straightforward thing. Like if someone's in the air, you go for an anti-air, like that, for example. I think that'll get you pretty far, but you definitely want to mix things up and go for stuff like option B, right? Where if someone's floating above you, yeah, you can axe down like them, you can axe near them, but if they read that, if they predict that, like so, you can try and delay a little bit, or you can jump up into their space. This is what I usually do, is if someone's floating above me, I like to jump into their space and do something like a recovery, something like a jump nair as opposed to a falling nair, so that they learn that that space is no longer 100% safe. Like it seems like this 2 jump height zone is really what's super safe for me, and so something that you can do rather than just trying to patrol the ground and guess when I'm going to come down and hit you with a dare is instead maybe jump up, try and contest me up there, or at the very least delay your attack, be a little bit more patient on the ground and wait for me to force an option. Maybe I run out of jumps and now I have to dodge. You can punish that dodge with a string. Maybe I have to land eventually. You can try and punish that with something high priority like an axe sidelight, like an axe nair. Axe Endlight even. Axe Downlight is a fantastic one. But yeah, it seems like you go for option A almost all the time, which is like the most straightforward thing, which makes sense, right? That's how you learn how to play the game. But I think in general, people, again, since this is trying to help you all out in gold, if this is something you also struggle with watching this YouTube video, then yeah, I think learning how to access more options, which is just something that comes with experience, dedicated time. You know, I don't knock anyone for it really. It's just, yeah, it's part of improving, is learning more tools. So something like delaying movement, something like growing more patience. And it really takes effect in the small areas. You notice when I was floating above and using these dares, I like very subtly, maybe I did an extra jump, or I mixed in a fast fall to make you think I was coming down to the ground, when in reality what I was actually doing was just trying to bait out an attack. And in general, you want to make your opponent's job harder and harder to win. Maybe they're better than you, maybe they're worse than you, it doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters is how good you guys are playing in that current match, the interactions in the match. And you want to make their job as hard as possible to win. And part of how you do that is you become unpredictable. Sorry, wow, that was a mess of me trying to say that. And obviously, like, it's easy for me to say, like, haha, forehead, just be unpredictable. So, like, how do you actually do that? You do that by being able to do a lot of different things and selecting between them. And so for Katars, for example, I think the most obvious anti-air option is going to be something like a jump nair, something like a downlight, something like an endlight. And it seems like you don't really commit to jumping more than once in the air, which is also something that I'd recommend, is like threaten that area as well. Axe is one of the best rising nair options to threaten this area directly. Honestly, probably the best weapon in the game for it. So that's also something I'd consider. Alright, so this game I'm going to try and go a little bit more in depth on how to directly beat floating players, since it seems like you were struggling with that in the last game. I actually have a whole section in a video about this. It's called the 4 tips to approach, or 4 tips to beat passive players, I believe. I talk about beating floating, but there's a few things that you can do. Also, it seems like you tend to dodge in a lot off of strings. I haven't really been going for strings a lot, but be aware of that. Also mix up your to mix up your dodges and stuff like that. So to beat floating players, there's a few things you can do. Number 1 is timing based, and so if you're trying to anti-air them and they're beating you just barely out, it's the same thing that I've been mentioning before: small delays or doing it a little bit early, depending on if they're trying to bait you with jumps like that, right? So like that downlight, if you did that a little bit later, yeah, I would be able to jump one more time and punish it, but because you did it at that time, it caught me falling down. The other thing is delaying, because if I'm just trying to jump out and bait out something like that sidelight, for example, or that endlight, right, like I'm just trying to bait out attacks now, and if I went for any of those punishes, I would have been able to get them. So that's the other thing, is to delay. And the third thing is to enter the zone. So I mentioned the zone on the ground of this horizontal dash distance, but there also is a zone in the air. It's kind of unseen. This is what people talk about when they say spacing. It's this zone of threat. And so knowing the different zones of your weapons, Katars have a shorter range with it, so you have to kind of be closer to your opponent, a bit more accurate than something like the axe, although axe is higher commitment, so everything has its trade-offs. The vertical zone of your attacks, generally speaking, is not going to be as wide-ranging as the horizontal ones, because you can't dash in the air, but it's still good to know, because jump impulse can launch you into the air pretty high. So if I'm floating in this area, a jump nair is actually unreactable. So if you do a jump nair right here, it hits like that, it hits me, and I can't react to it. The only thing I can do is predict it, and if you do it a little bit slow, maybe I'm able to react to it, right? So threatening the area with your unreactable options, getting into a space, a spacing, where you can threaten those areas instantly and the opponent can't react to it, is really the way to go when people are just floating above you. Because people that are playing passive, 99% of the time, they are not reacting to what you're doing. They're predicting what you're going to do, setting themselves up for it, and then reacting to that afterwards. If you enter their zone, they won't have enough time to actually react, and they're going to have to guess what you're doing. And let's say they get it right. Sometimes they get it correct. Maybe a lot of the time they get it correct. But one way or another, it's making their job harder, because then they have to try harder to beat you, more likely to make a mistake, and you can create some openings for yourself. Sorry, that was a bit scatterbrained, a bit jumbled on my thoughts there, but hopefully that helps a little bit. And best of luck improving to get to plat, Miss Foffy. Hopefully that helps some of you watching on YouTube or in chat as well. Make sure, again, to be respectful to everyone who comes on stream, because it's not the easiest thing to do, and that's going to be it for me. It looked like towards the end there you're getting maybe a little bit flustered about me just floating above you and going for a lot of attacks, but hopefully what I was saying in the earlier sessions can help with that. And if it doesn't, I'm so sorry.